And the pullout quote that I love so much, because it really was a direct inspiration to The Reckoning, said, "Remember her name, Renata Drake. She is the female Jack Reacher we've all been waiting for." And I so appreciated it because the Reacher series obviously was a huge influence. The idea of a female knight errant, someone who would have both the damage, because you have to be somewhat of a damaged person to be able to live like that. And so the skill set and the determination, just, the package of abilities and traumas that would enable you to be a pseudo or a sort of a cousin to Reacher, was part of what shaped Renata and definitely what shaped the books.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, you'll learn about their craft and them as a person, and you'll become like me, fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they blurb. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them not only as incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. So my guest today is Kelli Stanley. And Kelli Stanley is the critically acclaimed and multiple award-winning best-selling writer of the Miranda Corby literary noir series set in San Francisco in the 90s. Library Journal has called Miranda one of crime's most arresting heroines. Kelli is the founder of an Anthony Award-winning nonprofit publisher, Nasty Woman Press, although nasty is the complete opposite way to describe Kelli as a person. Kelli has earned a master's degree in classics and a double BA in art history and classics. She's a fan of Art Deco, speakeasies, and fedoras, as well as jazz, comic books, nature hiking, theater, and film. One of her proudest accomplishments has been her inclusion of the literary heir of Dashiell Hammett by his granddaughter in Publishers Weekly, and serving as the historical mystery guest of honor at the 55th BoucherCon World Mystery Convention. Kelli is also a champion of libraries and has led the free books event at BoucherCon, in which writers are invited to read from their favorite banned book. A couple of librarians are talking about banned books, and attendees are encouraged to donate books to the local library where the conference is held. Her latest book, The Reckoning, starring Renata Drake, just published last week. So a belated happy pub day. So glad you're joining me.
Thank you, Jen. It's always not only a great pleasure, but an honor to talk to you because of how much I admire you personally and obviously the work you do as a librarian. You guys are on the front line of literacy and the fights against book banning and recommending, books to people so that there's a good fit. Because we used to do the same thing a bit long ago in another life when we had a comic book store, my mom and my partner and I, in San Francisco. And we were one of the few all women owned stores in the nation at that time. And we thought I had a great deal of, and still do, appreciation for graphic storytelling. And I always thought, there's so many different approaches to it, from manga to the stuff that DC was coming out with Neil Gaiman and independence and not just the superhero stuff. And I always thought, if I talk to somebody for a little bit, I can set them up with a comic book that they would like. They may not expect to like a comic book, but I bet I could find a comic book like what they would. So in that lifetime, in that experience, I got to taste a little bit of what you guys do all the time, which is setting up readers and with, information and with books that you think that they're going to sync with. So thank you.
Well, I was going to say, I could say the same thing about you, that without you all writing stories that sit on the shelves in my library, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And I think because you've done it with comic books, there's something really unique about being able to find almost like a matchmaker, just the right book for that person, depending on what they enjoy reading and also what they're in the mood to read. And just because I like something doesn't mean somebody else will. So we call it in library world a reference interview,
Cool.
Asking the right questions to get to the heart of what somebody's looking to read. And I am so excited because I cannot wait to be handing The Reckoning to people that are coming into my world. And the library features prominently throughout the story. So I thought that was really cool as well. But Do you want to take a moment and introduce everybody to Renata Drake?
Well, sure. Ironically, Renata started long ago in the very, very back of my mind, actually, before I was a novelist and before I got my graduate degree, when we were running the store. And I originally kind of conceived of her as a superhero. That was sort of the root of the character. As what she became was something obviously very human and very different. But I sort of conceived of a situation where you had a woman who embodied, super heroically or not, a sense of justice that is righting a wrong, that is generating a reckoning, that is stepping in to, if not rectify a situation, because there are some tragedies obviously that can't be fixed, but at least she is giving closure to herself and other people for a crime that had no answer, that had no legal answer, no redress, no acknowledgement. It's funny because as people, when we're angry or upset or feel wronged, even on tiny little things, if it's somebody who pushes you in line or cuts in front of you or is rude to you on the phone or whatever, what you're really looking for when those slights, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, however small, however they occur, when that happens to you, what you're looking for is acknowledgement. You're looking for the acknowledgement on the other party that, hey, yeah, I screwed up. I'm sorry. And basically if more people step forward and apologized half the time, it would be, the world would be a happier place. And when you see this sort of unrepentant crime that is just run amok and the justice system is unable or unwilling to do what it needs to do, which is to,
Hold people accountable.
yes, hold those people accountable, make them take responsibility and, dole out punishment accordingly. And when that doesn't happen, it breeds a sense of despair, a sense of hopelessness, and people don't feel like they have any shield and so forth and so on. So Renata kind of came from that place. She was a character that I conceived of, sort of one of the worst things that you could go through as a person, and that she, had to see the death of her little sister, to whom she was really close and was the protector. And everybody knew who was guilty. And because of diplomatic immunity, this person was unable to be touched. And that was driving her crazy, literally, because it's like, she, as a daughter of a cop in particular, she needs to have that sense of, righteousness. She needs to have that sense of, she knows she's not going to get Josie back, but she doesn't want Josie's death to go. And I won't say vengeance, but it certainly emotionally plays a role in the book. And it's an understandable emotion, but it goes beyond that into a philosophy of, when you do something so heinous, when there's crimes that are committed, somebody needs to pay the price. Somebody needs to step up, and responsibility needs to be doled out. It needs to be pointed out. It needs to be emphasized. And she saw that the system was failing in that. So she goes through her therapy. And now I'm talking about the novel, obviously. The germ of the idea, as I said, was pretty old. But when I started writing the novel, I wanted to set it in a time and a place that I knew really, really well. This is probably the closest thing I will ever come to writing anything that I know so well. I wouldn't call it at all a memoir, but I will say that there are a number of things that happened in that novel that did happen to people I know. A lot of tragic things were true. Those were some very real events that happened to the people in southern Humboldt in California, which, for those of you who are not from California and are listening to this, Humboldt County is a very, very rural county and a very rugged one in the northern part of the state. It forms what is it's the heart of what is colloquially called the Emerald Triangle, which was sort of the biggest marijuana production area in the States. Was infamous for that, but it should be more famous for its redwood trees, which are the Sequoia sempervirens, the coast redwoods. Some of the oldest remaining groves on Earth are in Humboldt. It is beautiful, as I said, a very rugged, very mountainous, wooded county, and I spent my adolescence there. And I spent it, and I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, around the time that Renata was there. So I wanted to sort of take this character that had been germinating for so many years in the back of my head through all the other lives I've enjoyed, from graduating from, getting my master's degree and then becoming a writer. And I wanted to sort of merge that concept with my experience and knowledge of Humboldt, because Humboldt itself is a place that was at the time another place where law wasn't effective. Okay. And it wasn't effective when it wasn't enforced, and it wasn't effective when it was enforced. And there is a good argument to be made that when it was enforced, it was even worse than when it wasn't enforced. And the explanation for that is that historically, when logging decreased, and that's obviously a very limited industry, as any industry that takes from the earth and doesn't give back is going to be, marijuana became the economy in southern Humboldt, and not necessarily Humboldt County proper, where the only major town in the area is Eureka, that had about maybe 150,000 people. That was a coastal town on Humboldt Bay, and then in the 1920s it was actually thriving. Actually pops up in several short stories by none other than Dashiell Hammett. So it was a pretty thriving community in Humboldt then. But, south of Eureka through to the Mendocino County line, rugged, small, tiny towns, 1,000 people, sometimes less. Marijuana replaced logging and tourism as the number one economy. And that kind of started back in the 60s and then 70s with this thing called the Back to Land movement in the United States, where people disenchanted, people who self-identified as hippies or people who were tired of the rat race, went back to the land, lots of books about it, health food stores, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, it became economically profitable to raise marijuana. A lot of the people then, though, who were doing it were small town people. They were not giant growers, right? They weren't investing. They would raise some for themselves, and then they saw they could sell some on the side, and that's sort of how it was. And nobody really turned much of an eye, seriously. I mean, the big growers were often eventually caught. And there was crime, because anytime you are dealing with an illegal economy, there's always going to be crime. There's going to be a lot of disappearing people, which there was. There's going to be robbery. There's going to be murder. That's just the facts.
Right for a Kelli Stanley story.
So the pivotal part about The Reckoning is that Renata comes in at a pivotal point in Humboldt history, which is you're dealing with this sort of area that's become famous or infamous for raising pot. And most of the people who had been growing it at the time, as I said, were just sort of your next door neighbor, your school teacher, even your librarian. But in the early 80s, the governor of California at the time, Deukmejian, decided he was going to make it a political platform to really criminalize weed and criminalize the heck out of cannabis. So he developed what then was the largest paramilitary task force in America, called CAMP, the Campaign Against Marijuana Production. And what that did is it set up sort of it really felt like you were at war when you walked down this small town. There was black helicopters flying above you, and it was scary. And what this did is all those people, as I said, were just sort of growing weed on the side. And I am not defending or promoting that. I'm just saying this is what the case had been. They were driven out because they could not compete on that level when they're going up against the government. So who comes in? Well, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does capitalism. And what happened is CAMP brought in drug cartels. They were really responsible for major crime groups to come into Humboldt, and they basically created organized drug cartels in the area. It's just like Prohibition, when the consumption of alcohol was outlawed, and people were no longer able to, make their wine or do this or do that. Who was responsible for satisfying the itch, which still persisted, for gin and speakeasies? Well, it was organized crime. Prohibition gave birth to organized crime. And in Humboldt, camp gave birth to the giant drug cartels that then moved into Humboldt County. And with their movement, with them coming in, crime went up even more.
Right.
So
And this book is a great setting for all the different nuances and the different layers of things that are happening. There's, 3 teen girls that go missing. There's, Renata's walking down the sidewalk in this small town, and yes, black helicopters flying overhead. I should also point out your book is set in the 80s, which is like a wonderful time because there's tons of nostalgia references. I mean, just the big wheels in the driveway. I have some fond
those are cool.
memories of going down a hill and jacking the brake, so that you
Yeah.
could spin. But references to movies and references to music throughout this book. But the fact that it's a small town just makes things even more tense, right? And one of the characters says that, it's a small town and you know both the victim and you also know who the criminal is. And so that tension, it's not this nameless, faceless thing that you might find in a big city. It's this small town. It's your neighbor. And so what ends up happening, nobody trusts one another.
Exactly. How can you? And, that is actually based on an experience that I had in high school, because we did have a murder. It happened when I was in high school and the person was caught, but everyone knew it had to be a student at the high school. I mean, it's just, I remember sitting there talking it over with my parents, and we were all trying to figure out who was responsible. And my mom actually had a connection with one of the parents of the person who was responsible. So it's like they had been to that person's house. So I was like I said, you wind up knowing these people, what's going on. It's a completely different dimension than just the anonymity of a city where, it's nameless, faceless people, and you might feel empathy, and I hope you do, but actually knowing someone, it makes a big difference.
Huge difference. And Renata comes in, right? She's grieving the loss of her sister and like the lack of justice that was done, and doesn't want her sister's death necessarily to be in vain.
Right.
So comes in and is completely intrigued by the fact that there have been 3 teen high school girls that have gone missing in the last couple years, and figured, well, perhaps this is an opportunity. Maybe I can give those families some justice.
Exactly. She's suffering a great deal from PTSD, huge trauma. And she's relying on what her psychiatrist has told her, which we hear throughout the book when we're hearing her thoughts. But she is also her impulse had been to protect her sister. She feels like she failed her sister. She couldn't protect her, and one of the things that she's dealing with is the guilt of survivors. You think, well, if only I had done this, or if only I had done that.
Or the what if game.
Right. And she's playing that. And so that sort of is one of the motivations, I think, that causes her to, even at her own peril, because as you know, the FBI is looking for her because she left Washington, D.C. in a hurry. She wasn't supposed to. And, even at her own peril, she feels like she owes it to Josie, and she owes it to every other young woman who has disappeared or who has been forgotten, to do something. And I have to say here, God, because this made me really happy as a holiday gift. I mean, it was just a tremendous surprise and a great honor that just in this past month, Deadly Pleasures reviewed the book from the wonderful Meredith Anthony, and who's a fantastic author in her own right. And the pullout quote that I love so much, because it really was a direct inspiration to The Reckoning, said, Renata Drake, it was something like this. It was, remember her name, Renata Drake. She is the female Jack Reacher we've all been waiting for.
Mike.
Yeah, that was such an incredible gift, and I so appreciated it, because the Reacher series obviously was a huge influence. The idea of a female knight errant, someone who would have both the damage, because you have to be somewhat of a damaged person to be able to live like that. And so the skill set and the determination, just, the package of abilities and traumas that would would enable you to be a pseudo or a sort of a cousin to Reacher was part of what shaped Renata and definitely what shaped the book. So the fact that Meredith got that right away made me really happy.
There's a beautiful passage in the book from Renata's perspective where she's saying her sister's name, Josie, Josie, gone, like a firefly on a summer night, like a laugh over a lopsided birthday cake, an ache that never ceased, sharpness and dullness and pain, such pain. God, a missing part of herself, the better part, gone, leaving nothing behind, just the memory that followed her. I mean, well done. I mean, being able
Thank you, Jen.
to capture that sense of opposite things being true at the same time, of the sharpness and the dullness and the ache and the memory, but at the same time, the memory causes that pain
Right.
because it's so fresh. And I think she recognizes that that's what the families of these girls who have gone missing in this town in Humboldt County are experiencing, and even to a different degree because they don't have any resolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you think about the people who have missing family members. That's why I have such respect for people who investigate cold cases, because there is no such thing as a cold case, not to the people who survived the victim. There is somebody out there that has suffered something, because we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live isolated. There is some mother, there is some sister, there is some friend, there is someone who knew that person. And for them, that is not cold. That is always going to burn, and it's going to hurt. And at the same time, as human beings, we cling to our memories, but the more you experience of life, you realize that not every memory certainly is ever going to be a consolation. I mean, it's not a pure, happy, joyous thing that you are trying to rebuild in your own mind. You're going to have sad memories. You're going to have memories that may give you joy, but at the same time are going to feel like a knife in the back as soon as you stop, because of the sense of loss. When all you have is a memory, you hold on to it no matter how sharp it is around the edges, because that's the only thing you have left. But it does hurt. It hurts because the pain of the loss, the pain of that missing element, the pain of what, the person you loved is gone. And to live with that on a daily basis and live with the doubt of, well, what happened to them? And constantly replaying it, that is a form of hell that is just unfathomable to me. I mean,
Yeah. Dante would have a level for it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible. I mean, as a writer, I'm prone to always trying to figure out a story. It's like anything I see, I will try to figure out a reason for it. I will put together a story. I'll put together a narrative. It can be from seeing somebody do something weird in the middle of the street, and then I will concoct something for the reasons what's going on. And, but to have to do that under circumstances where you're suffering loss and you're trying to figure out what happened to the person you love, that's hell on earth. So yeah, that's, Renata realizes that, and she feels that kinship with those people, even though she knows who did this to Josie. She doesn't want other people to feel this pain ever. If she can contribute something to stopping it in one place at one time, she will.
Which is admirable, because some people will just say that's it and shut down. But the fact that she's so unique and so gritty, wanting to offer that sense of comfort to these families in spite of what she's lost. And there's a line in the story as well about how many people are destroyed by a single crime. And you talked a little bit about it earlier. It's this ripple effect. Everybody's impacted. And then I think it's amplified because this is a small town, and they don't trust each other. And Mike, who runs the local paper there, says to Renata at one point, secrets are hard to keep, so we're better at hiding them. And that's a line that has stuck with me, because I think about that in a small town where you pretty much know everybody or know of them, how you get away with something.
It's strange, but you do. I mean, I could tell you from growing up in Garberville. I mean, not growing up because my early childhood was not spent there, but my adolescence, I lived there from about 13 to 18. So I
Okay.
graduated from high school at South Fork. So this is high school in the book is where I actually is my alma mater. I could tell you that it surprises me because then, I thought that I knew everything about everybody. But in talking to, I'm still in touch with high school friends on Facebook and a few in text. And my classmate, the two of us were voted most likely to succeed. And so we've stayed in touch over the years and he has done great. He's like a tech giant. And anyway, we correspond. He's stayed in touch with me over the years. He was telling me something last time I talked to him about a classmate. And he's like, well, so and so and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I had no idea. So even though I did know some things and some of those things, actually, as I said, I wound up using in the book. Unfortunately, the incident that happens to Martha, which
Mm,
I won't mention here, but that happened to a friend of mine. That actually happened.
that's
She never
horrific.
told her parents that I know of. She told me when I spent the night at her house, and I was 15. I think she was 16 when she told me. It happened to her when she was in junior high. I don't know if she ever told anybody else. So that was based purely on experience. And she has sadly passed. She became a teacher. She was a wonderful person. So it didn't stop her from fulfilling herself and being the really great person that she was. But it always knowing it has always haunted me. And so that was one way I was able to get it into the book. Um, but anyway, when, I was talking to my friend, he was telling me stuff about other classmates that I had no idea that so you can keep secrets. It's just some people know one part of the puzzle and some people know a different part of the puzzle. So there
And
were
never the
secrets
two
kept.
shall meet.
Right, exactly. So there were definitely secrets kept that I was not privy to. But yeah, it is hard. It's definitely hard.
Having grown up reading a lot of mysteries, the Nancy Drew, the Trixie Belden, those types of series, one of the things that I love in this book is that Renata befriends a couple high schoolers who have their
Right.
own detective club, which I think is so cool. This is like the 80s, and I just imagine like there's a trapper keeper, and
Yeah.
there's, the pen that has like, 10 different colors of ink and they're writing
Mhm.
things down. But again, it speaks to the pieces of the puzzle because they all have different perspectives on things. And then they realize as high schoolers that when they come together and then add Renata into that they're able to kind of help figure some things out.
Right.
And I just absolutely love the dynamic,
Thank you.
between that group.
I really enjoyed writing it because I always felt as a kid that adults ignore kids. Well, maybe ignore isn't the right word, but they don't take them seriously, at least in the 80s. I mean, parenting has changed a great deal since then, but it's still, it's kind of the Stranger Things dynamic where, the parents are living in one life and then the children are living a completely different one. And when you're dealing with something that happened to their own or near age group, um, they are often the people who actually can tell you, even if they don't know the whole story, they will know something that will enable you to figure out the truth because kids are much more perceptive, much more in tune with feelings, you know, uh, they get creeps from other people. I mean, I always trusted my instinct as a young girl for good reason. And I had some fairly scary experiences to do with it. And then I talked about actually during the Me Too movement in 2017. I posted about it publicly. Um, that were, let's just say, close calls when I was 13. And you learn to trust your feelings, and some of the stuff you wind up sharing, maybe with adults, maybe not, just like the friend of mine who was based on Martha, who was one of the teenagers. What happened to her? As I said, I don't know if that ever went beyond me. I don't know if she ever told anyone else. I don't know if she ever told an adult. So there are things that are shared and that are dealt with and that are known. And that's just for a person an adult coming from the outside perspective, trying to solve murders. That's children and young adults and teenagers I mean, that is truly an untapped source.
They're much more savvy than I think we give them credit for.
Absolutely.
There's talk in the book of police officers coming to do interviews, and because of their presentation, none of the high schoolers feel like talking or trusting or think anything's going to happen as a result of that conversation, so they just don't bother.
Exactly.
But they're the ones that are able to pick up on what is an anomaly for a particular individual, one of their friends or their student or somebody who has a locker near them.
Right.
They're able to pick up on the things that are irregular, that little piece of the puzzle that when you add it up with other things helps to make sense. But if you're dismissing them,
Hmm.
it does a huge disservice to being able to solve crimes.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I had to be, as a writer, I was really trying to approach it with Renata as, she has to go in with a great deal of understanding and respect for that. She can't come in or come across as patronizing or as too adult, but at the same time, she also can't put on, a phony attitude like she's trying to act younger than she is.
No, they suss that
She's
out right away. You talk about
right,
teens in the library, they can tell.
right. They've got to be able to get an idea of who she is, and she's got to be very real with them and very honest and respectful at the same time. It was a balancing act. It was a balancing act for her, and it was a balancing act for me to write it. To be honest with you, it required a number of different approaches. Especially relationship with Marcus, who is
Great
going through
character.
his own. Yeah, I really liked him and I liked his mom. He was going through a lot of stuff because, racism exists in small towns and in cities and in everywhere in this country and always has. And unfortunately still is, as we know. And, I didn't want Renata to come off as being somebody who's like this coming off as being the great white crusader, who's got the answers to everything, because that's also completely wrong. But she had to be just an empathetic person who thinks that racism sucks, which it does. It's one of the worst things in the world. It's one of the worst examples of irrational, stupid hatred that exists. And so when she's developing this relationship with Marcus, it's, she's got he's a young black kid. She's this white 20 something chick from Chicago, it's like originally. And so it's like they've got to have this kind of give and take. And she's, so she's got to approach it just the right way. Otherwise, she's not going to get anything out of it. I mean, because the fastest thing a teenager will do is shut you out. I mean, that is like it's in their DNA to just shut you out automatically, because that's what adolescence is all about. It's like forming these sort of inner cliques and, your BFFs and, your inner
Your sense of
circle.
independence, yeah,
Right.
and who
And
you
your
are.
identity. But yeah. And you do it quite largely, largely a lot of it's built on, the people you're hanging out with, the people you're dating at that moment. And that's very dynamic. That changes all the time, which you also see in the book. So, she's got to be really careful. And it's because it's so easy to get frozen out by a teenager. Even their parents know this, right? So she's so she's got a job to do. So thank you for picking up on that, because it was tough to write. I had to give that a lot of thought.
I think I liked the fact that Marcus just called her by the knife name instead of calling her
Right,
Renata. I just thought like that just goes to their whole rapport.
right. K-bar, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I actually bought one of those for research purposes, so I could see how large it is. It's an actual military knife from World War II, from the Marines. A K-bar, says K-bar right on the
yeah,
hilt. So I got one from the right time period and everything. Well, they're kind of cool. They are kind of cool. Yeah, and I knives just seemed like it was part of her character, her not wanting to get into guns, even though her dad was a cop, not really knowing a lot about guns, but she had this sort of weird kind of, she liked Swiss Army knives and she liked buck knives, and I grew up with them too because we lived in the woods, so we always had, I always had a pocket knife in my pocket. So was like, yeah, knives work.
how do you get to know? I mean, I know you said this started back when you and your partner
The
and your
germ,
mom
yeah.
had a comic book store, and the character has since, evolved. But how do you get to know that character, to know what would be in keeping with?
Well, it's sort of, as a writer, I think characters sort of write themselves in a sense. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was first thinking about the novel, it was going to be more of and it started off in the first draft, it was going to be more of a back and forth between what Renata's going through and what the FBI is going through to find her. So it was going to be more of an emphasis on um, seeing both perspectives. But because I had decided to set it in humble, and because I do tend to get heavily involved in my settings, as a writer, it's one of my favorite things to do. I had some very good advice from my agent and others to just jettison the other part and just focus on Renata's voice, because I
She has a
was
great
doing
voice.
both. Well, thank you. And once I did that, where I was like, okay, because I'm sort of writing this emotionally as she's the dominant voice. I totally saw what my agent was saying, which is like, this is good, but this, if you stick just with Renata, that's you. This, otherwise it's a good thriller, but sticking with Renata and really having it be filtered entirely through her, that is more who you are as a writer. And it's true. So once that happened, it was like everything just fell into place. And she, like I said, most of my characters wind up writing themselves. They do unexpected things. I don't necessarily know what they're going to do. I mean, I have an idea because I do outlines for action and for plot, but it's sort of like I'm going on a Sunday drive and I have a map, but I don't know if I'm going to wind up taking a detour. I have a map in case I get in trouble and I need to get back home, but I might just want to take this dirt road over here because it looks kind of cool or whatever, so that's
Right.
sort of
It's
how.
like a choose your own adventure kind of approach.
Exactly. And it becomes itself, because when you're going down that road, you don't know if, well, that's closed. That road's washed out. Of this one, this has a detour. It's, they're doing some construction here. So you don't know where you're going to wind up. Exactly. But you kind of know the general direction you're going in. And so that's sort of how I approach things. And then I let the characters pretty much write themselves, and some characters Marcus certainly turned out to be more of a major character than I anticipated. The woman who works at the hospital with Doris became more of a major character, and she was actually based on, I don't want to give too much away, but just so that she was based on an actual person who did not have a happy ending. And let's just say that what happened to Doris, the person that the fictionalized Doris is fictionalized, but the person who inspired that portrait met a bad end through spousal abuse. And that, because I had met her, again, the small town, that has bothered me since that time, since I was a teenager. And so I worked the Doris plot into this book as a way of trying to give the real life inspiration for Doris some justice. So in my own, as a writer, I was trying to do what Renata's doing in the book. I was trying to give some, even though, I'm not mentioning, of course, any names, and she was basically just the inspiration for it, basically the inspiration for someone that I wanted to sort of, give a different ending to. That's what I wanted to do, because
Yeah, you tackle so many themes in this book. There's alcoholism,
yeah,
there's spousal abuse, Ian, who's the drama teacher,
yeah,
the things that
yeah,
happened within that school to previous teachers,
hmm
principals. You have missing girls, you have the governor starting camp, and so it's this paramilitary state with, black helicopters flying low overhead. Somebody who's escaping, which is Renata,
hmm
she's kind of on the lam, so to speak. There's just a lot of things that are tackled, and it's so hard. They talk, I'm sure, to you all as writers about, what's your elevator pitch, 60 seconds. I don't know how you could do this in 60 seconds unless it were like a disclaimer, at the end of commercials at times.
right.
So it makes me happy when I see on the cover of the book that it says it's a Renata Drake thriller. So this
hmm
tells me as a reader that there's going to be more.
Right. Definitely more. We'll see how this does. And I am finishing up number 2 as we speak.
Okay.
And if they're successful enough, I definitely would love to keep writing them because, the inspiration, as I said, one of the inspirations for Renata is what Deadly Pleasures picked up on, which is sort of a woman Reacher type. Reacher's so iconic and he's so unique. I wouldn't use that comparison directly, but just in terms of someone
Somebody
who's
who's
traveling,
avenging.
who has empathy and who gets involved in other people's lives. So and a woman doing that is a very attractive thing for me. And it comes to like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or it comes to those the medieval stories about the traveling disguised royalty, or Richard the Lionheart in disguise, traveling with Robin Hood, and all it comes from a tradition of those kinds of knight errant.
Which is your background.
Well, it's something that I've enjoyed. My background's a little bit earlier than that in terms of my degree, but it's stuff that I've always enjoyed as a kid, and I think it's a very potent part of narrative. I mean, if you really think about it, Odysseus, which the Odyssey is another thing that's mentioned in the Reckoning
Mhm.
about coming home. That's about a lot of things too. But Odysseus has adventures on his way home. And the idea is Renata going home? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know, but she's definitely going to become involved with people on her way to wherever she's going. So yeah, so it works, but it is very hard to have a seamless elevator pitch, which is sort of why I was really glad they picked up on the Reacher thing, because that makes it a little easier, because it's like shorthand for, you get the idea that somebody's sort of homeless, traveling around and helping people.
And
And
who
that's
wouldn't
good
and
enough.
who wouldn't want one of those people around, right?
I love it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's really interesting that Renata gives wisdom, to the teen detective club for the high schoolers.
Yeah.
She says, hold on to what's important. Don't let anyone, anywhere, at any time, no matter who they are, make you feel less than you are. And I think that she's doing that in the 80s, which is so important. I think it's applicable today
Yeah.
in terms of making sure that every individual has that sense of agency, doesn't let people dull their sparkle, their shine, and is comfortable with who they are and know who they are, to, I want to say, ignore the noise from the person who's trying to make them feel less than.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's critical. You have to drown it out. You can't let your own need for approval make you enable others to disrespect who you are and
Right.
deny who you are. And, the setting, the reckoning, a lot of things, as you point out, it's also about how difficult it is to live in a lawless state. We rely on law. We rely on law not just to keep us safe, but we rely on law to make our lives a little easier. We want to be able to take for granted getting on a trip, but getting on a bus, driving down the street, being able to get to work, all the things that cause a society to function. We want to be able to rely that have power, and then, we'll be able to go here or go there, and not have to be terrified, right? So
Right.
we rely on the idea of law just in order to survive at the level of culture that we have as animals on earth, what we have manifested for ourselves. And then what happens when you are living in a way that is contrary to that law? What kind of questions does that raise for yourself? How are ethics determined? Because, as we all know, law and morality are not the same thing. There have been
No, you're
plenty of laws, and continue to be plenty of laws, that are completely immoral. I mean, what Hitler did, the Holocaust, was legalized by the Nazis, period. That's all I can tell you. It's like the
right.
international court, the world, because we were fortunate enough to have anti-fascists win the war, recognized the barbaric, unbelievable cruelty behind mass murder, which, is why we had the Nuremberg trials. But within its own state, Germany legalized everything it did. So law is not always, or even, I mean, I wouldn't want to bet on percentages. There's been a lot of laws that are bad. And so you have to sort of, what happens? You're living this life, you're contrary to law, but what about ethics? What about morality? All those questions are sort of the kinds of things I wanted people to think about when they read this book, if they decided to give it a reread. The first read, I'm hoping that they just really get into it, can't put it down, and really enjoy meeting Renata and get some satisfaction from it, get some feeling like I want to read the next book, and really have a great thrill, in a
Was
deep sort
holding
of
my
way.
breath a couple times, like, hurry up, like, hurry up, they're coming,
Good,
talk,
thank you.
talking to the character in the book. But I think, to your point, a lot of times, books are read and enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And then some books are read and enjoyed and are discussable.
Right.
And I think it was Jodi Picoult who talked about being able to use books to discuss tough things, because you're talking about a character in the book. You're not talking about the person across the table from you. You're not talking about their particular choices. You're talking about a character in a book. So you're able to have those tough conversations, and we need to have them in order
Exactly.
for us to grow, to have that sense of respect, to hear another point of view, to understand a point of view and respect it. Doesn't say anything about you having to agree with it.
Right.
But those conversations need to happen without such anger and vitriol, we'll say.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with a healthy debate, but the emphasis there is on healthy. And that means listening, and it means empathy, and it means trying to understand. It also means, frankly, logic. You have to have a rational plane upon which to have any debate. Irrationality is rampant right now. But, if you want to have an actual rational discussion, it's great. And when I write anything that I write, I try to write a book that, and The Reckoning, of course, is definitely included in this, that you can read it and reread it. I don't like to think that I'm spending a long time and a lot of effort composing something that you're going to read, and just, if you want to reread it, that you would get something out of it. That was my goal. It's like, so that you get something on the first read, you will get something on the second read. You might even get something on the third read, something different that you can savor and then appreciate. And that is my goal as a writer, because like I said, it's like when I read a book, I typically, if I like it, I always read it again, because you do get new things. And, because I'm writing genre and I'm writing crime fiction, in this case, a thriller, we're going to get a lot of the fun, suspenseful, stuff. And that's going to be an emotional impact. But then
Right.
maybe on the second time around, you'd think, oh, wow, this is really making me think. This is making me think about what it would be like to live in an illegal economy. What would that feel like, And so that's always my goal, to do that, because I find that interesting,
Absolutely.
So,
I would agree. I would say goal met.
thanks, Jen. I'm glad. I appreciate
No,
it.
I think, Kelly, I think that's the great thing about books, is that they can inspire conversations. And even if you're not having conversations right away, there's conversations you're having with yourself. I don't mean that in a woo-woo sense, but things that you think about long after you turn the page and think, well, what would I do? Or how would I act? Or are we different? This was in the 80s. Are we any different in the 2020s?
Right.
And how do we continue to make progress and do right, and kind of all have that little bit of Renata in us that looks for leading with kindness and empathy and motivated by a sense of justice, knowing that we're more than the bad things that happen to us.
Very nicely said. Yeah, that is really important. I mean, it's like, I would like to be more like Renata. I would like to be more like Miranda at times. It's when you're writing, and maybe this sounds woo-woo or possibly crazy, but I always feel like my characters kind of get extemporized, and I'm like, I know them and I really care about them, but they become something separate from who I am, even though they're technically my characters. I know that, but at the same time, they actually feel like separate entities. So it's, we're all a little crazy. I think you have to be a bit in order to manifest that through writing. And we spend so much time by ourselves,
Yes.
creating this stuff. But yeah, I like her. I think she's a good role model in a lot of ways. In some ways she's not, some ways she is. She's a person.
That's humans. I mean, we
Right.
all have, I mean, we're not all good. We're not all bad.
Right. Yeah. She
Hopefully
makes
the good
mistakes.
outweighs the bad. Yeah. I mean, we all do. We all make mistakes. Question
Yeah.
is, do we learn from them?
Right.
And as you said, and we talked about at the very beginning, are we accountable to that? Can we apologize and kind of say, oh, you know what, my bad. I didn't mean to cut in front of you.
Exactly.
Right. And just go back to that emotional intelligence of being self-aware and self-managing. And if you do that, then it impacts a lot of your interactions moving forward
Oh,
with others.
totally. It totally does. I mean, it just makes life so much easier when you just respect the fact that there are other people around you and that they also have rights to be there. Period. I mean, it's not that complicated,
It
but
is not that complicated. Somehow we've managed to like Rube Goldberg the world and find the most difficult way to do the simple of tasks.
yes, I loved Rube Goldberg. He was a genius.
That's
I always like to see something that Rube Goldberg and sort of a meeting of Escher and Rube Goldberg. I mean, wouldn't that be cool?
Well, that would be awesome. So I could talk to you for the whole rest of the evening, but
Well, same here. I'm having a great time.
likewise. So we're going to get to stories and final 5 questions. Okay. So Renata's inspired to go to
Garberville.
Garberville from a Viewmaster image.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen a Viewmaster image that's inspired you to take a trip?
What a great question. Well, I have a great love for Viewmasters, which is why they're in the book. When I was really little, my parents got me one of the deluxe viewers that was like a slide projector, not just the handheld one, but like the slide projector. And I had a whole set of amazing Viewmasters. And one of them was, were the dinosaur stuff that Renata was talking about in The Reckoning. I would say in this case, I had a sort of Renata moment when I was in Australia because I had some birds of the world. I think they were a Viewmaster set. And it was like, it gets tropical sort of, it may have been Australia background, like in a rainforest. And when I was taking a tour in the hills in Victoria, it was a great time. And we went, it was on my birthday too, which was awesome. It was a great place to spend a birthday. We saw koalas in the wild and, I flew a helicopter over the 12 apostles. Well, there's not 12 of them anymore. I think now there's only like 9 because they're these sea stacks that have crumbled on the coast. But anyway, it was a great time. And we did a lot of walking in some of the rainforest around Victoria. And I did have one of those moments where I was like, wow, this is just like the Viewmaster. So yes, that's a great question. Like I said, Viewmasters were like my generation's pathway to the world. I mean, they have the Disney Viewmasters. I remember seeing Snow White, Sleeping Beauty and stuff, but those ones that were like Birds of the World or The Lost World of Dinosaurs or, stuff like that, they were just amazing.
So you and I both grew up in roughly the same time period in the 80s. What fashion trend did you rock thinking you would never look back on pictures and feel ridiculous?
Well, let's see. I liked mullets. I don't think I had one at the time, but I did like them. What did I have? I had like Cyndi Lauper clothes, kind of, and I had big shoulder pads, did a lot of plaid. I kind of went for more like a preppy / Valley Girl look. So I had like a lot of ties and like plaid stuff and kind of think square pegs.
Yeah.
If you remember that TV
I
show.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Square
thinking
pegs, square pegs.
acid wash jeans were my thing that I was like, these are always going to be in fashion, especially the ones. And you would peg them at the bottom.
Oh yeah. Those
Yeah.
are awesome. I loved them. Yeah. Now, and when I was on stage, because at the time when I was first when I was in college the first time, when I was first getting a BA, I was not in classics. It was in drama. So I actually have a background in acting. And, I got to wear this fantastic costume that was like all parachute pants. And I was playing a madam actually in Comedy of Errors, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So it was really, really fun getting to play a woman of ill repute, on that level. I was wearing some really awesome orange parachute pants. So I have very fond memories of 80s fashion.
Yeah. In your book, it's broken up into acts, and there's an epigraph from Shakespeare before each act. What is your favorite Shakespeare play?
Oh boy, that's a toughie. Well, as much as I love comedy, I'm more of a tragedy drawn person. As an actor, I was in comedies, obviously, but I preferred to perform tragedy. So I would say probably Othello, because I think Agatha created the perfect villain with Iago. And Othello is so tragic, and you know, yeah, it's hard. I mean, Hamlet, of course, is Hamlet. King Lear is amazing. Macbeth, or the play that shall not be named if you're on stage in it, spooky and scary. And I love Lady Macbeth, and I've always wanted to do a production of Macbeth myself. I have some ideas about directing something like it. But I would say, yeah, my sentimental favorite, I think, would have to be Othello.
Good choice. What is your phone screensaver?
My which screensaver? My phone? Let's see. I think it is from the Disney archives, and it might be it's either BB-8 or it's the Three Ghosts from the Haunted Mansion. Can't remember which. That's either my screensaver or my the one that
desktop
pull up. Yeah,
underneath.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
They're
then
from the Disney archives.
final question. What
Sure.
song would you always include on a road trip playlist?
Ooh, road trip. Okay. My favorite road trip song. So normally I love jazz. So if I'm not on a road trip, my Desert Island album would be a 3 CD set by Nancy Wilson called Ballads, Blues, and Big Bands. And she's one of my favorite jazz singers. And I just love her.
Live several years ago.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I've heard her live too. She was
She's
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah. You should look for that set. If you don't have it, let me know, because I can get one for you. And it's great. It's got all kinds of jazz standards on it. Anyway, but on a road trip, it's different, because it's road trips. It would have to be Boz Scaggs' Lido Shuffle.
Oh, you stuck in my head the rest of the evening. and I cannot sing, but it is going around in my head right now.
Oh, good.
So I want to say a huge thank you to those of you who are listening, and to Kelli. Thank you so much for spending time with us talking about The Reckoning, which just published last week. Kelli has said her goal with writing is to give you an enriching, immersive, and unforgettable experience. After talking and listening to her today, I think we can agree. Done. To find out who else is visiting, go to storytocount.com. This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba.
Thank you, Jen.